Welcome to The Constant, where the only constant is change, and we go for a swim in the deep blue of business, technology, and culture. I'm Dziebel. The Constant is anchored in three locations: Silicon Valley, New York, and Riyadh. It brings to you a global range of events, viewpoints, and experiences, something that you can hardly find in a single place in the podcast sphere. We draw on a mix of sciences, from management to anthropology to biology to linguistics to computer science, to be able to penetrate deep into the many ways in which innovation, AI, and other technologies have been shaping culture. This said, all the opinions expressed on this podcast are the participants only. They don't represent opinions of our employers, clients, or business partners. When we show third-party content on this podcast, we're probably not going to do it today. It's only the content that's freely available in the public domain, such as YouTube and other platforms. No proprietary content is shared on this podcast without prior explicit consent by the content owners. Today, our special guest is Abigail Posner. Abigail and I worked together as brand strategists at Publicis New York around 2010. We both had L'Oreal as a client at different points in time and probably enjoyed it tremendously. And we're both anthropologists working at the intersection of technology and humanity. Abigail is a frequent speaker at various events, podcasts, and roundtables. Most recently, she was a speaker at the Advertising Week New York in 2025. Welcome, Abigail. It's great to
Thank you so
have you at the
much.
Constant. Yeah,
Thank
tell
you.
our audience more details about your amazing career.
Wow. Well, I don't know if it's so amazing, but hey, I think it was definitely fun. So, like you said, I started out studying social anthropology. And in fact, my focus was economic anthropology, which I loved. And I remember everyone saying, "What are you going to do with that?" And of course, like I have taken it into my life, into every aspect of my life throughout my career. So it's been such a great lens by which to view the world and by which to view the challenges, the business challenges we have in front of us, the technology challenges we have in front of us. So yeah, that was kind of my origin story in a way. I really fell in love with anthropology. If you actually just break it down, what anthropology is all about is the study of why people do what we do. So you can imagine that when I left university, I had a stint in management consulting for a year, and then I realized it wasn't for me. And then I found myself, like you, in the advertising world as a strategic planner, as a brand planner. And in that sense, I had to do the same thing. I had to ask why people buy what they buy. Everything from Cheetos to makeup, to insurance. And once you dug in and really tried to understand why people do what they do, you had a kind of foundation, right, to kick off so many new ideas, whether it's brand strategy ideas, new product ideas, communication ideas. And then, to just keep this leitmotif alive, right? Then I took this quest for the why to my world in technology. And, when I got to Google, I basically was recruited to sell Google to creative agencies. I had come from, Publicis like you. And the goal was to help the creative agencies really understand how to leverage the platforms. And I noticed something right away. Like nobody really knew what to do with me in the beginning because here I was, this like weirdo. I came in with my leather pants and my 6-inch Pierre Hardy shoes from France. And they were just like, what is that? And I did a listening tour with all these CSOs, our world on the agency side. And I remember one person saying to me, you guys at Google, you give us a lot of data, but you never go deep. And I thought, I may not know a lot about technology, but I know a hell of a lot about anthropology. This is my ticket. Because again, as I said, Google really they kind of throw you in the deep end and you have to figure it out. And so I realized there was something here we could play with. And then I was also really fortunate because I had to give a talk. My boss threw me again into the deep end and was like, go do a talk to these I don't know, it was business school students or something. And I'm like, on what? I had just come to Google, right? And he's like, well, go take this person's presentation and figure it out. And that's very common. It's like to just go and repeat someone's presentation. And I was like, I'm not going to repeat this presentation. So I anthropologized it, right? I was like, okay, I'll turn this into something that I could somehow talk about with some intelligence. We get to this moment for me to present and the technology was all screwed up. Like How many technology people does it take to fuck up technology in a technology company? It's like, so it was delayed. So my talk was delayed, which meant that the people behind me who were supposed to talk were delayed. And it was the best thing that happened because I came out of that talk, the person who had listened to me after, because it was delayed. So she had to listen to like half my talk. She was from the marketing side of Google. And she goes, "This anthropology thing, I want to know more about it. Let's go do something." And so between realizing that there was this opportunity that we knew a lot about what people were doing with technology, that's the data part, like, you know, how much time they're on their phones, or what were the most watched videos on YouTube, or, how many social media sites people are, have signed up for. Nobody was trying to understand why. And my feeling was, okay, if you really want to sell these products to our clients, you have to not just know what's going on, but why. Because if you know what and why, you can that much more easily get to the how. So between that insight and the luck of the technology not working, I was able to get some interest on the marketing side of the house. And we launched with our first anthropology study where I hired PhD anthropologists and put them in the field. And that was around mobile. And then more teams got wind of it and they would, you know, say, let's do a study on this and let's do a study on that. So here I have my anthropology kind of being the thread throughout my life. And then, of course, that was like my side hustle. I also built teams when I was at Google and helped build our creative engine. And towards the end of my career, what we were doing was really helping our clients create the most compelling and meaningful and effective ads and branded content, leveraging our data, but trying to go deeper and finding the why about it so that we could really kind of, leverage the platform as best as possible. Anyway, so that's been my kind of been my thread, and even in my thought leadership work, in my podcasting work, and now with my new newsletter, whether it's the article that I found interesting, or whether it's continuing to do more anthropological research on AI, which I'm doing, or even just walking down the street and having conversations and I record that, it's always with the intention of asking why and going deeper.
Right, right. No, well, let me just kind of throw my hook into one aspect of what you just said. The contrast between data and depth.
Yeah,
Remember how you said it? Yeah, because the Silicon Valley always had like the data, right? Google has the data, and then the creatives, the human professionals come in like, where's the depth?
right.
But then that was before deep learning showed up, before brand names like DeepSeek, came to the market, where the Silicon Valley and similar players globally started to try to own the deep, not
Yeah,
just the data, because through that data, currently AI is getting like deep learning. So in that deep learning, it not only provides us chatbot answers, but it also allows us to forecast what's going to happen, to drive change. So
yeah,
the podcast is all about change, but a lot of the change now and a lot of what the human matter we perceive as ours is in fact being taken over slice by slice, by AI. So it goes deeper and it didn't stay on the level of data. It may have heard you and other professionals who work with them, but took it in a different direction. Yes, why don't we go from data, deeper and deeper and deeper through more and more data, add algorithms, add reinforcement learning, add supervised learning, and start creating a universe, that humans will absorb and kind of replace some of what they thought was their depth. What do you think about that?
I think all of those toolkits are complements to the process. I don't yet see them as replacements of the process. And I'll give you an example of that. So in the what we call our Anthro AI series, this is a fun series. It's a video series that I do with my anthropology partner of almost 25, 26 years, Tom Maschio. And we go to bars. It's kind of fun. We go to bars around New York, and we sit there and we will analyze AI and its capabilities from an anthropological perspective. And there's no question there are amazing things that AI has enabled us to do and will continue to grow there. But there's certain things that still it'll learn. But certain things I'm still seeing that I need the human lens on it. So, for example, the way and I think this is starting to get addressed, but the way that AI has been created, uh, has been to look at the majority view, right? So if you're analyzing a topic, it'll, as Tom says, hoover up, right? All of the information, particularly the most topical information about something. And so what you'll get is the most popular, the most expected answer. Whereas in anthropology, it's often the outliers, the edges, the edge cases, which provide the insight. So until these algorithms adjust to the anthropological approach, I think it is a awesome complement. I don't yet see it as the be all end all source of the answer.
Okay, okay, interesting. It's just a recent study that just came out, and I think we quickly traded some text over it, argued that as a result of a test of AI against 1,000 humans on
Right.
the on the theme of creativity. So AI actually didn't do that bad. It
Right.
may not have been able to exceed the creative professionals because there, the level of skill is probably still unattainable. But in terms of measuring up against the average human being, AI did quite well and outperformed the average human being on that ability to exercise divergent thinking. So they
Yes.
use that, a typical psychological divergent assessment tool that we all as humans, whoever happen to be subjected to it, get subjected. So it's kind of at least the same level playing field for both humans and AI. So he outperformed the average human. So the question arises then is that are those gifted professionals that you and I have worked with closely over the course of our careers in advertising, and you actually spearheaded it in Google to bring that creativity. Is this creativity a product of a gift, that AI will never be able to capture? Or it is something that's just linearly can evolve, from more data, from better algorithms, from an average creativity to the diversion creativity, to the out of the box thinking, to the fringe, to the edge. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I one of the first articles that came out, or at least Harvard Business Review's first article on the generative AI, the creative capabilities of generative AI, the first thing it cited was its ability to associate divergent notions and concepts, which is the heart of creativity, to come up with something novel. So I am not surprised that there is that uh, element of AI has become increasingly more sophisticated. The question I have, and again, I am a major proponent of AI, so I'm not here to poo-poo it or dismiss it. The question I have is, you know, AI is developed, at least now, thanks to amazing engineers and coders. So the output is only as good as the input. And we are still trying to figure out the human brain. Now, maybe AI will figure out the human brain, but we are still trying to figure out the human brain. So, whatever input we have about the way people think and generate ideas is based on what we know about the human brain at this point. So, there are things that our brains do that we don't even realize what they're doing and how they're doing it. So, to be able to capture that in AI, that will be amazing. I haven't yet seen that, right? Because we don't even know how to capture what we're doing. So there's a great book called Blink. Have you read Blink? Right.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, I know.
And I love always the first chapter of these books is the best. So the first chapter talks about how this art assessor, I don't know the exact term, but anyway, he is able to see two of seemingly the same artifacts and assess like that which one is a forged version and which one is the actual. There is nothing different for the naked eye, nothing. And yet he's able to assess it. And so what this book does is really tries to dig into, well, what is instinct? Because it was his instinct that helped him figure out that this was the forged one and this wasn't? Well, instinct is really your brain processing a ton of information very quickly. Information that you don't even realize is at the recesses of your brain, right? And that information is based on past experience, based on, your expertise, based on knowledge, blah, 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 right? Based on how good your eyes are seeing at that time. And so his ability to recognize that that was a forged or not forged piece is happening at this kind of warp speed and at a way that it's just so complex, right? So that until I see that AI can do that, can understand the human brain better than the way that neuroscientists can understand the human brain, then I will truly believe that AI can do all the creative thinking without us. But right now,
Okay.
I'm not seeing it.
All right, all right. No, that's great. Let me just mention the World Economic Forum, that just
Yes,
finished
yeah,
in Davos. And obviously, it was divided into two huge topics that end on
I'm
everybody's mind.
sure.
First is obviously all the wars and everything that the US is doing and repositioning itself globally within the geopolitics and
Yeah,
the AI. So we're not going to talk about the geopolitics this time, but in terms of the AI, we already see that at that highest level, and there were all the luminaries in attendance at that event, there is a split, a very sharp split of opinions. People like Musk, or Amadei, or Altman. So they're all going to be arguing that we are a year or 2 years away, from superintelligence,
yeah,
from AGI,
yeah,
artificial general intelligence, which will have tremendous consequences, whether positive or negative. For some people, positive; for others, negative. But there's going to be tremendous consequences for humanity. And
yeah,
then there is another group, that did not exist in isolation from that group. Sometimes in partnership. Here's Jan LeCun, Demis Hassabis, CEO of Google DeepMind, who say like, no, that whole kind of scaling direction, when just let's add more computing power, is just a complete blind alley because going with LLMs and trying to train AI the way we've been doing, it's so different from the way we as humans learn. It's so different from the way primates that we descended from an evolutionary theory standpoint learn. It's very different from the way cats learn and behave. It's taking us into a territory, that not going to be ever close to artificial general intelligence, to any super intelligence. And these professionals, Jan LeCun especially, so most recently, he founded a new company, a new startup, left Meta, and now we have a me called in France, automatic machine intelligence, that actually tries to change the attack on AI entirely, completely. So we have to start focusing not on any rules, but on the perception, on the physical world, on everything that we absorb, and to the extent that we can predict and replicate it, maybe not to the pixel level of our lived experience, but to the general rules, of what we perceive and how we learn and how we adapt. So it's building AI, that's not a super intelligence, but more of your partner in your
yeah,
day-to-day life, because it's learning together with you. And
yeah.
here, the constant at our last episode, we had a technologist from San Francisco, a new startup, doing like just that. So they're building an AI platform that's actually operates, is learning next to you.
I
So
love
this
that.
AI doesn't claim to know everything, doesn't want to know everything, but it's solving its own problems in the world. And sometimes you can partner with it, or since AI can function 24/7, it's just doing its own thing, learning and experiencing the world the way that particular artificial machine, is experiencing it, but without any, so LLM is just a component of it all. So we saw that, at Davos, so there is a sharp split where one group is saying, whereas we're going in the right direction. We're going to be there, in a year or two. The other one, we're going in the completely wrong direction. It's a wrong train station altogether, the wrong continent. Yeah. So, but in fact, that's the way to go. In a sense, what you just said reminded me a little bit of, yeah, okay, kind of a moderate position. Yeah, we acknowledge that AI is strong. It's doing great thing. It's manipulating language great. So we're all proponents of AI, whichever form it takes. But let's also explore in the where we believe AI hasn't gone yet. And that's like, it may be intelligence, but it doesn't have the consciousness. And that sort of like consciousness maybe is a gift, that AI will never be able to replicate. Or if it starts replicating it, it's not going to be replicating it as a super intelligence. but as much as we
Right.
replicate it within humans.
Right. I think it's going to be able to take input and pretend that it is reflecting how a human being would respond, but it's not responding as a human being. So, like, why am I attracted to my husband? You know what I'm saying? Like, part of it makes sense and it's logical because, we have similar values and he's Jewish and I'm Jewish and he's educated and I'm educated. But like some of it is just like, I don't know. I just can't. I'm not attracted to guys who have a certain physique. Now, is the AI just is not it's not gonna know what to do with that, right? If it looks at my profile like a dating app would, it would be like, well, she should be attracted to da la 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 la, right? But there's so much going on in here that encourages me to go one direction versus another, which I don't know if a trained tool is gonna be able to totally reflect and understand. So, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I really do. I really do. What I'm really excited about, quite frankly, is the return to some of the innate human, for good or bad, right? Innate human responses and reactions. We have been living in the information age for a very long time. And that was a very important thing, right? We needed to get away from this superstitious, mystical, some of the stuff that was actually keeping us back as a species because there was just no logic there. Like we needed science, we needed technology, we needed all of that to evolve and progress. And this is why we live in the relative comfort that we do. But I'm also kind of excited because now AI is going to be taking over so many of those tasks that have been here in the frontal, lobe, right? In the neocortex part of our brain, so that we can now actually work other muscles that we haven't worked and tap and understand and respond to and harness the other aspects of our brain, right? The mammalian side of our brain. I mean, certainly we act on the reptilian side of our brain, but we don't really necessarily understand it very well or recognize it very well because we're so focused on the neocortex, right? So, again, will AI totally be able to offer the comfort that my baby needs as soon as they come out of the womb and doesn't even realize that they're a separate entity from me? Like, how is a machine going to be able to figure that out? It's going to understand it and know it because someone plugged it into the process, but it's not going to feel that feeling that only my baby knows because it smells me.
Hmm.
So again, I am all for AI and progressing AI and beating my chess score with AI, but I think in a way it's going and and I'm so excited that can do that so that we can return to some of the more visionary, emotional, visceral sides of being human.
Interesting. Yeah, let's. So there are two parts to what you just said that I think we can unpack a little bit more. The last piece that AI actually to freeze our hands to become more human,
Yeah,
versus AI makes us less human.
correct.
So, and we have to kind of keep this in balance. I remember at some point in one of your talks, or roundtables, you started talking about the presence of technology in human evolution and human history. So it's not something new. That it's something we always had.
Right.
And you started with even the invention of fire and all of those
Yeah.
things. Would you tell a little bit, like, what's your view of what role technology has played throughout history?
Yes, absolutely. We talk about returning to humanity. This is innately human, right? We as human beings want to progress and we want to find ways to make our lives better, easier, more comfortable, happier, right? So to do that, we constantly are looking for ways to enable that, right? The first way was fire, and fire changed us as a species entirely, right? Because it keeps us warm. It gives us light. So we can now talk, think, commune 24 hours a day, right? It allowed us to create metal and things to kill more meat, right? And to sustain us as human beings. So now, of course, all these technologies have side effects. And we've had to navigate through those side effects and encourage society to not take advantage of the negative side of it, right? Like fire can cause major damage. We saw that in California last year, like major damage. So throughout history, we have been propelled. It's an instinct, it's a drive to always find the next technology. And boy, has it changed us entirely, like the printing press, like toilets, right? And then, of course, you get to the internet and so forth. So, we've always, our instinct, our drive has to always been to develop these things, but always figure out also how to ensure that society doesn't use those things to cause harm to us.
I mean, like you said a great thing, so we have an instinct to seek technology.
Yes,
So again, so we have something innate in us, but it also this innate thing takes us to a place that's not ourselves anymore. Now we're kind of psychoanalyzing the human species a little bit.
totally.
And what I love about it is that anthropologists have kind of established for the past maybe 40 years that behind the origin of human intelligence stands not this lonely hunter who is kind of doing his choppers and choppings with one hand in an isolation from everybody else, and the tools improve in a linear fashion. No, it is precisely we became at some point intensely social.
Yes,
So we started interacting with each other. We started raising each other children. So chimpanzees don't raise each other's children. So they are so individualistic. They kind of stand on their own, so they have a very kind of rigid, individualistic social structure. We're very different. Surprisingly, we're much more like South American monkeys, than we are like chimps. Those two, that you can see like sitting, on a tree, hugging each other, and a female
right,
and monkey
right,
singing and duet, so we have that social component so strong in us that at some point a primal human community started intensely interacting with each other and kind of training each other and reinforcing on each other's behaviors and communications, that our intelligence has grown, and that's how our language has grown. So all of those things you mentioned, fire or language, so everything that we define ourselves as humans and attribute to our instincts, it may have already experienced that technological replacement early on, because from the very beginning it was a little bit more technological than what our earlier and earlier ancestors used to have.
correct,
So,
correct,
like even language, it can be just technology. How come, we haven't been able to teach our primate kindred how to speak for 100 years? We've been trying and trying to make them
right,
speak, and it
right,
never scaled. They never picked it up really. And then it takes us 10 years, once we got the computing power and to actually teach a chatbot, to
yeah,
talk to us in such a way that we won't be able to recognize whether it's a human or a bot. So
right,
the chatbot just recently passed the Turing test. So 75% of the time, people were not able to differentiate. So that's kind of amazing. Speaks from my perspective, it speaks to the fact that our language, the large language models, what we train technology on, is already kind of artificial in and of itself.
mm-hmm,
Although we claim it to be our own, claim to be our instinctive, true human thing. And
yeah,
obviously, in advertising, there is people like creative writers, they write. So, but still, it's a piece of technology that's surprisingly the
correct,
machine has been able to replicate at
correct,
a grand scale. So, we've produced the internet, populated with our data, populated with our stories, poetry, and everything else. And then we found the machine who will be able to train themselves on it and spit out back at us the greatest likelihood of the next word, that we're gonna say.
yeah,
So it's kind of an amazing thing in and of itself, that goes back to my original interest in your work in Google, where, you were trying to present depth, where there was no depth, just data. And then, so they went into the deep learning. So my feeling is, that we're constantly as humans constructing new artificial realities, and then we naturalize them and say like, well, these are our instincts. This is what makes us human. What do you think?
Well, you've said a lot of interesting things. I think if it's okay if I actually talk about a few things that you've mentioned versus
Absolutely.
answering that
Sure,
question.
sure.
Okay, so I think like the first thing that you mentioned about us as a species, that we are communally based, right? And that is how we survived. forgive me because I don't remember all the terminology, but there was definitely another species we were competing with. I don't know if it was the Neanderthals, who were much bigger and stronger and can therefore catch more animals. So you think they would beat us, right? Us humans in terms of the race to, survive, and they didn't. And it was because they were not communal. And so, as we go back to comparing like the human instinct, the creativity that comes from the human brain versus that from the technology, there are some things about us that the technology is not going to, it's not going to be able to solve for, that only we can solve for, right? So, I mean, yes, can a technology enable me to be more social because it's set up, a meeting for us to connect? Yes, but it's not going to be my replacement for the other human being. And it's that other human being. There's something about us connecting as human beings that is just so vital. And so when we talk about the creative process, one of the things we also talk about a lot, in our creative world is how you got to do it with other people, right? And so whilst I cannot tell you how valuable my AI tools are for me to really harness my creativity and, more importantly than anything, express my ideas, there's still nothing like you and me talking and getting together, because this is how we're built, right? We're built to want to commune. We are built to barn raise. We cannot live without each other. So much so that we now have a crisis, right? We have a crisis of disconnection. And I just wrote about this in my newsletter, that like, here we are debating in Davos, like, is technology going to take over the world? And I'm like, well, look right in front of you right now. You're worried about technology surpassing human blah, blah, blah in 10 years. In 10 years, we're not going to have babies because people aren't having sex, because they're not connecting, right? That is just so innate to the human species. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing that you talked about as well is the ingenuity that human beings bring to the technologies to then take the technologies to the next level, which I think is super interesting. We talked about how technology has changed us physically as a species. But what it also does is it changes our brains such that we unlearn things, right? But we also overlearn in other ways. So let me give you an example. Like, there's an example from this book I'm reading, The Source, and how she did an experiment. She's a neuroscientist, and she did an experiment with her eye doctor. Her eye doctor said, "Oh, you're going to need bifocals. You're going to need bifocals." And she's like, "I am going to hold off." And by the way, this is me partly for vanity. Okay. But I'm like, I am going to hold off on the reading glasses. I'm going to hold off on the reading glasses. And she said the same thing. Again, I said it for vanity. She said it because she does not want to make her eyes lazy, because this is what happens. What happens is, when you start correcting for a problem, you make yourself lazy there. And you see that with people who start using the corrective glasses, right? That their eyes, because they are, were hurting a little bit or whatever, use these glasses. Now, once they stop using for a second, they can't see, right? Because their eyes adjusted. Our brains want to seek the easiest way out. So what's happening is technology, like, we do not have to get lost anymore, ever, because we got technology, right? We've got maps. But what happens when you don't know how to get lost anymore is you don't know how to deal with getting lost, right? Because our brains are not now functioning in a way to give us the toolkit, whether it's like lowering our anxiety, looking at the sun, using an internal compass, whatever the hell it is, because we get so used to technology, right? So our brains do change. On the other hand, what is super interesting is that we also build upon the technology in probably ways that even the engineers never thought, you know, was part of the plan. So I'll give you an example. I was really fortunate enough to work on a lot of anthropological projects around technology, and we called it humanizing digital. So for mobile, for our phones, we did a study, and it surfaced a number of insights. One of which is the capability of the phone to provide something that's an anthropological term. It's called placemaking. Now, placemaking is a very old term. That's something that came with technology. And basically, it's the human desire to want to connect to your physical space, right? We still, despite how virtual our lives are, we still want to connect to the local places and spaces that surround us because they ground us. They remind us of who we are. This is why we like to decorate our home. This is why we have the local haunt around the corner that we go to and have our beers every week, right? And the wonderful thing about our phone, even though it was created as a mini computer, right? It actually is such an amazing way for us to placemake like never before. So what do I mean by that? I used to walk to work. I live in Midtown Manhattan, and I used to walk to work when our offices were in Chelsea, and I would walk through Hell's Kitchen. And if anyone's been through Hell's Kitchen, it's restaurant after restaurant after restaurant. And, I would walk with my earphones in and whatever, probably emailing while I'm walking, really dangerous. But, all these restaurants, I didn't pay attention. They were like wallpaper. Who cares? Okay, but imagine this. I have to stop at a stoplight. I'm not going to jaywalk today. And I notice a new restaurant. I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." Well, right then and there, I can go onto my phone. I can go on to whatever it is, Chrome, and investigate. Well, what's this new restaurant? Is it a new restaurant? Maybe it's old and I didn't realize it. Oh, no, it's a new restaurant, new chef, special cuisine. Oh, that's interesting. And then I go to Yelp or I go to, one of the New York magazines and it gives it really good reviews. And I'm thinking, oh, this is really great. So I get onto my emails or my texts and I text my assistant and I go, you know what? Cancel my lunch meeting. I'm going to go in here. Okay. So I cancel lunch meeting. Um, and because I had read these reviews, I know exactly what to order. So I sit down. I also know which great seat to sit in because of all the Yelp reviews. So I sit down, I order the dish. The dish is gorgeous. So what do? I take a picture of it on my phone. I send the picture out to my friends through social media right then and there. And, everyone else is on their phone. So they're responding right back. And they're like, "Oh my God, I love that restaurant. I actually went there. My husband proposed to me." And I'm like feeling so good. Oh, this is such a great place. And they're like, "Oh, and everyone who works there is super nice and add some chipotle to that dish. It'll make it so much better." All of that investigating, that texting, that picture taking, right? That sharing on social media, all of that enabled me to place make like never before. So now I feel that much more connected to my community and to my neighborhood. The guys who made this thing, they're like, "Nah, this is just a mini computer for your pocket, right? Go take a few pictures while you're at it." But this was something that is a human drive and instinct that we then attached to the phone. And this is one of many instances of us taking technology and kind of reassessing its value to enable us to be that much more human. And so going to AI, do I think AI is going to make us lazy in some ways? And maybe back to the reading glasses thing, take away some of the muscle that we have built around certain ways of thinking and sure. But it's going to build a whole other set of muscles. Or if anything, it's going to allow us to resurface muscles, as I said before, maybe the more emotional and the more visceral muscles that we hadn't really played with before. And I have another example of that in our Anthro AI series that Tom and I do. He had done some analysis, Tom had done some analysis about this creativity tool that allows you to virtually paint, but also it attaches music to it. So like the harder the stroke, the more intense the music. And you're actually like composing music as you're painting, but it's not an intellectual exercise. It's very much a visceral exercise. You feel the visceral aspect of creativity. And one of the things I think we forget to even talk about is that creativity, you think is, it's very intellectual, right? Oh, you're combining unlike notions and coming up with something novel. But it's also very emotional and very visceral and could be physical. We don't pay attention to that because we haven't had the bandwidth to do that. But now with these AI tools that allow us to recapture that feeling and allow us to get into that flow and really be aware of that sense of flow. Wow. What more can we be doing as human beings to get to kind of build those muscles again?
Yeah, those are great stories. So there is this dynamic between humans and technologies happening, throughout history. And in fact, so for some of our nerdy listeners, so the earliest evidence of fire is actually coming from Neanderthals. So just recently, scientists and archaeologists in the UK published a paper saying that fire was first invented by Neanderthals around 400,000 years ago. So it goes all the way deep, into our primate hominid lineage. So
Totally.
it's been with us, and maybe there were periods, it was in and out, and then it got firmly established, with us, the modern humans, the Homo sapiens sapiens. But it's been with us for such a long time. It's as if it's our kind of twin brother
Yeah,
technology or our alter ego. So when we always tend to invent something, run with it, and then bring it back, kind of reconquer it, reclaim it as our human thing to enrich our human experience.
correct.
And the two directions, that the AI is currently taking, that again, like I said, transpired at Davos, the one, where AI is striving to be super intelligence and AI that is trying to be a partner. So maybe there are two different ways in which we as the human species are trying to tackle the AI problem. Either when we don't know which route is actually better for us as humanity, because AI striving to be super intelligence gives us those apps, so it gives us apps constantly, those tools. We don't talk anymore about like, well, I painted this or I did this. We say like, I found this app and with this, you can do this. And
Yeah,
then I found another one. Have you heard that app? So I don't hear people say anymore, well, I molded this in a statue or I did something. It's all about what technology is bringing us. And we're trying to reclaim it through those little apps that are becoming more and more
absolutely.
technology inspired through things like the iPhone that becomes so close to our heart. We sleep next to it. So it is a new placemaker, like you said, but it gives us the tools to grow as humanity. Whereas the other direction, where AI is not trying to be a super intelligence, but absorbs and tries to behave like us, not complement us and give us stuff, but behave like us, maybe is a little more scary along the way.
Sure.
Because we may be able at some point, there will be AI, that will be kind of absorbing and developing traits, that we currently still claim like human, because the big LLMs, cannot possibly tackle it because it's a whole different.
Totally. See, there was a whole series of interviews, I think it was the New York Times, about people having affairs with these I don't know what you want to call them, avatars, and they knew it. They knew that it wasn't real. They were literally having affairs with it. Their spouses knew. So, like, yeah, it's already happening. People they're simulating relationships.
I know we'll end up using all of this sophisticated technology, all the computing power, all the trillions of dollars that are invested just in order to get better sex and better food.
Well, but
Just
that's
like
my
fire at
feeling.
some point. Maybe it was the reason we invented it, because we wanted to be warm and we wanted to kind of eat better.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm just naive in my old age. It could be that. But you can't have sex with a computer. You just can't. And even if you blow up a piece of plastic, right? And have it speak in a language and whatever, and you got robots, it's just not the same. It's just not the same as a human being who surprises you or farts or whatever. It's just not the same. So could you simulate a human being so much so that like it's almost a human being? Maybe. But then that robot thing is not going to do things that a human being would surprise you to do. Like say, you know what? I don't want to cheat on you. I have a boyfriend. I really shouldn't do that. That's not right. Right. Well, that's a moral thing. That's not a computer generated thing. So, yes, you could take it all the way to the extreme where everything is just a mimic of human beings. I think we human beings need the mystery that other human beings provide us, for better or for worse.
Yes, I agree with you. That the word consciousness, as a
Yes.
contrasted with intelligence, captures for me, our uniqueness, that will never be, at least, it will probably never be trodden upon, by AI. Consciousness and the choices that we make.
Right.
Because the freedom of choice, is critical. It's critical from various religious traditions, as we know, Judeo-Christian traditions. So we were imparted, with a free will, by God. So that comes
Right.
from a different source, in a sense. And it's probably something that we do uniquely capture, and that's our pool of mystery that we carry with us, that we bring to constantly to the table, and we pull out of it as a bag of tricks various things. It can be technology, can be anti-technology, can be different binaries, that we pull out of that bag, of consciousness and free choice that comes with it. And it just kind of keeps giving in that consciousness that we carry innately with us. And that brings us back to Davos, in a sense, that there were these geopolitical issues, that are currently ravaging the planet. And is there any correlation, connection between our fascination, the new fascination with AI, the hype, that we're building, and all the truth and facts around it? But even in this best iteration of the factuality and the practicity of AI, is it still a distraction, for what's truly happening on the ground outside of that matrix that we're building? Meaning, like with the wars, that
Yes.
we engaging into a new cycle of wars, Israel and Gaza, Ukraine and Russia, the kind of the political dissent, and the conflicts that are happening in the US out of all the places now. So those are real things. That has nothing to do with AI. Those are the real visceral things. People are physically dying and killing each other and committing horrendous
Yeah.
acts, violence against each other, and have great episodes, of heroism. So does it mean, that those two words, are just coming apart too far a bit? And that we are sometimes migrating into the AI, just to be distracted because we cannot really
Yes.
capture the mechanism by which we, as instinctual, maternally raised, human beings, are living through, but we cannot really cope.
Right. Well, I think there, in some ways, AI is the cause of some of this in a roundabout way, or related to it. But and what I mean by that is like we are so scared of China overtaking. I shouldn't say we. The United States government is so afraid of China overtaking the US in the war with technology. And we are at a cold war with China, right? And that is also kind of underneath some of the geopolitical things that are going on, right? So, like, why is Trump all for taking over Greenland, right? Because of Russia and Russia slash China, right? I mean, it is kind of related, right? So, but that being said, I do agree with you, and this was my point earlier about the article I wrote in my newsletter. It's like we have so many challenges in front of us right now that I think the obsession, and that's the word, we are obsessed with AI. Everyone is talking about AI. And I think we should talk about AI. And I think we should figure out the guardrails now before it gets too late. It's only now that Meta is now getting sued for its addictive qualities. Like it took what 15 years, right, or 20 years for these social media sites to finally get their comeuppance. I'm not saying I agree with all of it. I'm just saying, right? So good thing people are now trying to address the potential challenges with AI now. Great. Awesome. But it has become an obsession with everybody everywhere. And I think you're right that I think it's kind of like, well, wait a second. There are other human ailments that we need to address. And by the way, if we don't address them, the whole AI challenge is going to be that much more concerning. So if we have a country, if we have a rather a globe, if we have a world that is so divided, well, then guess what? How they're going to use AI? The people who are against you, they're going to use it in really nefarious ways. So instead of worrying about the nefarious ways that AI could be used, let's try to solve for the human conflict so that they don't even want to use AI in nefarious ways. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Or what I was talking about before about the disconnection between human beings. We're so worried. AI is going to take over. We're not going to talk to each other anymore. It's just going to be all AI. no one's going to be communing anymore. Well, it's already happening. So instead of worrying about it so much, why don't we solve for what's going on now? And maybe in the solving of it will actually better enable us to figure out how not to ensure that AI doesn't continue to be that, disruptive force in human connection.
Yes, 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 yes. I mean, I think at some point we made this interesting comparison. So, like what gave us Mein Kampf, right? So it's the
Right.
printing press, and then the madman Hitler. So we keep thinking having a bias in favor of either driving technology like the printing press forward or blaming technology for what we
Right.
believe the problems might be, instead of focusing, on the environment, the human environment, that has created the Hitlers of the world.
Correct.
And I'm
Correct.
not trying, to in any way, put, finger point here, because everybody has truth, their own truth, but the fact, that the conflicts happen, the fact, that alienation between people
Yes.
happen,
Yes.
it kind of takes two or three or four or five people to tango, in a sense.
Yes.
There's always like a social environment, that just something is not working there. And we're clearly not solving for that with the same level of intensity as we're trying to solve for AI, whether positively or negatively, or through LLMs, or through that new way, the world models, as Jan LeCun is saying. But we're completely, as we do that, because it takes time for people to do that, and then they publish stuff, and people read that stuff, and people spend their time on that AI thing. Maybe during the same time, life is going by and being neglected, or real human life being neglected, it starts creating problems.
I agree.
Later on, wake up from our AI bliss, or digital bliss or mobile bliss, and we'll look at ourselves, and we are chock full, of problems, that AI cannot solve, because they didn't come from AI. They came from us being the humans, the
Correct.
biological, the evolutionary,
Correct.
the people. Yeah.
And the brains that are thinking about AI, those brains could be super helpful in figuring out how to resolve those conflicts, right? Because they're very creative brains or very intelligent brains. Ah, wouldn't it be awesome if that was just redirected, to these other challenges?
But they're not excited about them. They don't get the high, that anybody needs, the passion,
I
because it's
know.
technology, and it's like something that abstract that excites them. But the human things, they are not probably not even properly presented to their minds in a way that they can grab that problem and start ruminating and finding solutions.
Right. Well, I think it's also has to do with the human psyche, right? We get excited by the hot new thing. I bet you if you went into AI right now, Claude, ChatGPT, whatever, and you said, "What are the most pressing challenges facing the human species right now?" It would say things like starvation, disease, conflict, right? The AI knows better than we are because they are not human, and so the AI doesn't do what human beings do, which is, oh, let's go after the hot thing, the clickbait, the hot thing, the hot thing, the hot thing, the hot thing. And so that's also, it's we human beings are a wonderful species, but we also have our issues. And one of them is that we get excited by the hot, hot, hot thing. And we, and it's the water cooler effect. And someone else talks about it that you admire. So then you want to talk about it and you want to look good and look smart because that's what the smart people are talking about. But it has nothing to do necessarily with what is really the challenge at hand.
Right, right. It's kind of reminds me a bit of a weird problem, even we have with technology. For instance, despite all of our technological growth and sophistication, we still cannot solve the problem of paper jam in
Yeah,
print.
right.
So, despite all of our sophistication
Yes.
of pharmaceutical development and progress in vaccines over the past 150 years, we still cannot cure the common cold. So
Totally.
it's the strange thing that happens, everywhere. So we are good at something that's not relevant, and what is relevant is not interesting to us. So we cannot get good at solving for the relevant.
Yeah,
So because the relevant is not sexy, something else is sexy.
correct.
Or, there is our overall approach is just kind of we're missing certain steps. We're not going to perfect it like, like in Japanese culture, there is that notion, of perfection when people can spend hours and days and years on perfecting that little skill. And until they find the moment of perfection, they're not going to move to anything else. But we tend to bypass it. Yeah. Who cares about the paper jam? We're going to curse. We're going to freak
Correct.
out. We're going to yell at each other. But, we're going to go for the next big thing. We're not
Correct.
going to solve that. Same with the common cold. Same with starvation. We constantly leave those things behind. And AI doesn't operate that way, obviously. So AI,
Right.
has that systematicity, that it has no flaws. Once it circumscribes the terrain where it's great, we cannot exceed that. That humans are this in betweenness. We're much slower, than cats. We're not as intelligent as AI when it comes to any rule-based tasks. We've already seen this with chess. We've already seen this with the new tests that AI is doing much better when it comes, to legal stuff, accounting, any of those things, AI can already pass those tests, better than humans. Anything that's formalized and rule-based, AI is going to be better with
Right.
than us. We
Yes.
can never compete with them. And we have that strange position between not having the strength, and the aptitude of the animals and not having the intelligence of the machines. We kind of fall in between the cracks and we have all these unsolved problems that animals cannot solve for us and the machines cannot solve for us. So what will take us to actually circumscribe those sets of problems, everything from paper jam, to starvation, and actually sit down and solve, whether using AI or using some other innate hidden thing that we have in our brain, but
Totally.
kind of solve it because we have enough money in the world and enough food
Totally.
to feed everybody,
Totally.
but we're not sharing it with
Totally.
everybody.
Totally. Or how about just not showing love?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, how hard is it to smile to someone on the street? So easy. Why can't we do that more often? We just don't. Yeah, we just don't. And I think you're right. And this is why I'm hopeful. Maybe it's the anthropologist in me, right? Because I believe that human beings want better, right? So I'm hopeful because as I said, no matter how much, even with the nuclear bomb, we haven't used it again. We haven't. It has only been developed as a form of deterrence, and we haven't used it again. Now, can you be cynical and say, don't you put that in the hands of Iran because they could use it? Sure, right? But we haven't, right? We, at the end of the day, tend to use technology for better than for worse. So I do think that's going to be our future. What I'm excited about is I don't know what I don't know. Meaning, like, okay, so if the AI is going to do all this stuff for me now and enable things I couldn't do before, what does that mean I can do? Right. And so I think about like 2 years ago, there is no way I would have been able to publish the articles I do. There's no way I would have been able to work on the book that I'm working on. No way I could have been doing my newsletter. No way I could have done my videos. No way. So, like, all of a sudden, I've always been I blogged and I had a podcast. So I've always been a bit of a content creator. But now it's like I can do things I never thought I could do. So I'm super excited about that. Yes, I think there are all those debates and challenges, and it's like fun to like your mind meld to kind of like challenge yourself with all that. But I do believe in the human species. I do believe that we're just gonna want to be happier, healthier, more creative, more productive in ways that I don't think we ever thought we could be. So everyone can be a poet. How awesome is that?
Well, I think, that's great point, to conclude our conversation today, because I love the hope that you instilled, into this episode. Because after all the ups and downs that we had throughout the past hour,
Yeah.
going on the dark side, and going to the bright side, we finally figured out, that there is this hope and there is that space, where that hope lives and comes from. So, which is very kind of reassuring, and I think, our audience, will appreciate listening to the very end, that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Abigail, so much.
This
Been
was
great
so
to
much
have you
fun.
here. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Thank you. I'll see you around.